We will begin in a few minutes. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Stephen and Winston.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hello, hello.
Good afternoon.
Winston, have you been here before? Welcome.
I'm new here.
First time?
Yeah,
Where did you hear about us?
I follow the Facebook, South Africa Facebook.
Okay, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll be starting in a moment or two. It's not yet 1 o'clock.
Yep.
Do you see the text on the screen?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you. Chapter 3,
yeah.
Netzirut.
Nizirut.
Yeah, Netzirut.
Nizirut is the state of being a Nazirite. A Nazirite is the English word, a Nazir is the Hebrew word. And it's someone who takes the vow not to drink wine or cut his hair or become in contact with the dead.
Could not become a Nazarite then. It would be difficult for me to vow not to cut my hair.
Must be something there. It applies to the back of the head too.
I guess it's hair all over the show, right? Hmm. How's the weather by you, Rabbi?
Today is lovely, fine and sunny, 22, I think.
Sure. Lovely, wonderful.
You're in Cape Town
Very cold in Cape Town.
and rainy.
Yeah, most probably raining. It's very cold. Must be snow around on the mountain somewhere.
All right. I won't go to the mountains.
Winter is a coming in. David?
Winter is here.
Cold,
Quite,
huh?
quite summery today up here in Joburg, but otherwise
I believe so.
it's definitely here.
Okay, it's after 1, and although we only have
As he wrote.
5 of you, half a million, but we will commence. So I assume that you learned the first 2 chapters, but if not, let me just give the ground rule. Somebody's got some noise in the background, so please, if you can just make sure if there is noise in your immediate environment, please mute yourself. Otherwise, I have to mute you. I don't like to do that, but if I have to, I will. Okay. So you have already learned the Nazirite. The basic definition comes from the beginning of the book of Numbers, Parshas Nosoi. We read it just a few weeks ago in Shul. The Nazirite is one who takes the vow to not cut his hair, not drink wine or grape products, or become or have contact with the dead. He's sort of sets himself up in a holier state, and there are now we'll get into this chapter deals with the time period of a Nazirite. Can you see me, or am I too dark there? I can close the curtains behind me if you need.
No, you're quite dark, Rabbi.
Okay, let me close the curtains. I like the sun, but okay. Now you can see me. Okay. So halacha 1. Stam nazirut shloshim yom. Stam. Stam means ordinary, summer, without making any specific details. Someone doesn't specify. He just says he's going to be a Nazir, a Nazirite. Nazir is the Hebrew, Nazirite is English. If he doesn't give a time period, it is the standard time period is 30 days. Even if he says, I will be a Nazirite for a very long time, he still has to do it only for 30 days because he hasn't specified. If you don't specify, 30 days is the normal standard. If he specified a time less than 30 days, number 2, there's no such thing as less than 30 days. 30 days is the minimum. So if he says, I'll be a Nazirite for 1 day, 10 days, 20 days, or 29 and a half days, it doesn't matter. He still has to be a Nazirite for 30 days. That's the minimum, and that is the standard. So if you say for 1 hour, you're going to be for 30 days. 3, if he says a time span longer than 30 days, 31 days or 40 days, 100 days, 100 years, he's a Nazirite for the time he specified, neither more nor less. If he says it'll be for 1 hour, it's also 30 days, number 4. If he says I'll be a Nazirite for 30 days and 1 hour, then he must be a Nazirite for 31 days, because it doesn't work by the hour. So Once you're going beyond the 30 days, you could specify 1 day or 2 days. If you just say 1 day, it's a minimum of 30 days. But once you say beyond 30 days, you could say 31 or 32. And if you say 30 plus an hour, it'll be 31 days. Close this phone, sorry. Number 5. If he says, I'll be a Nazirite from here until I reach such and such a place. So if he hasn't started his journey yet, then it's 30 days. But if he is already in middle of his journey, if it was less than a 30-day journey, then again, the minimum is 30 days. If it's more than a 30-day journey, then he must observe 1 Nazirite vow for the duration of the days of the journey. So if it's a 35 or 40 or 50-day journey, that's how many days he'll be a Nazirite, because he specified for the duration of the journey. 6, if he says, I will observe 2 terms of Nazirite vows, or 3 or 4, then he has to observe that number. But each one is 30 days. So if he says 2, he has to be a Nazirite for 60 days. If he says 3, 90 days, and so on and so forth. At the end of each 30-day period, however, since he said it's different terms of vows, it's not one long vow, it's different terms of Nazirite vows, then at the end of each 30-day period, he has to go through the conclusion ceremony of the Nazirite, which is, he has to shave, he has to bring certain sacrifices, and then he begins observing the second Nazirite vow. Even if he said, I'll observe 100,000 Nazirite vows, and it's impossible to live that long, he still has to observe them one by one until he finishes the amount of Nazirite vows he took, or until he dies, basically. So basically, for the rest of his life, he'll be doing Nazirite conclusions every 30 days and carrying on. The good news is he'll only have to grow hair 30 days long. He won't have long locks like Samson. When a person says, I'll observe Nazirite vows as many days as there are in a year, well, which year is it? Solar year or lunar year? So most of the world uses the solar calendar, the Gregorian, which is 365 days normally. The Jewish people use a lunar calendar, which is normally 354 days. So he says if he did not state explicitly which calendar he's doing, he would go by the Jewish year, and he would have to observe it for 354 days. 8, if he says, I'll do 1.5 Nazirite vows, there's no such thing as a half. A half is also 30 days. So he has to do 2 30-day periods. If he says, I'll be a Nazir, and listen to this language, I'll be a Nazir and 1 day. Hareini Nazir v'yom echad. Or Hareini Nazir v'sha'a echad. I'll be a Nazir and 1 hour. As we said before, there's no such thing as 1 hour or 1 day. So if he says more a Nazir and another one for a day or another one for an hour, that means 2 30-day periods. If he says I'm a Nazirite for 30 days and 1 day, then he has to observe 1 Nazirite vow for 31 days, because that does not sound like before. Before he said, I'll observe a Nazir and 1 day. So it sounds like 2 separate periods. If he says a Nazirite for 30 days and 1 day, then we assume that that means 31 days. Again, we're assuming what did he mean. 9. Now we have witnesses, and the witnesses are conflicting. They're not in agreement. They both pairs of witnesses say they heard this guy take the vow of the Nazirite, but each one says, no, they heard him for a different period. So one set of witnesses says he took 2 Nazirite vows, means 30 plus 30. The other testifies he took 5 vows, which means 30 times 5. So what do we do? Who do we follow? We don't know who's telling the truth. It's 2 against 2. We have no way of choosing one set of witnesses over the other. So he's required to observe 2 vows, not 5, because included in the 5 are 2. So all testify that he took 2 vows, not all testify that he took 5 vows. How's that for pure, simple Talmudic logic, right? The ones who say 5, 2 is within 5. So everybody agrees that he took at least 2, but we can't agree on more than 2, so he'll have to do only 2. 10. If he took 2 Nazirite vows, whether he took them both at the same time or one after the other, for example, he said, I am a Nazirite for a day. Then later, again, he says, I'm a Nazirite for a day. If he counted the days of the first vow, so he's done 30 days, and then he prepared his sacrifices to finish his first 30-day period. And then before he did that, he asked for the nullification, the absolution of his vow. So he went to a Beth Din and he said, listen, I regret that I made a vow of the Nazirite. I didn't realize X, Y, or Z. Please, can you absolve me? And they listen to him and they hear, and if his argument sounds reasonable, then they will absolve him. So he will not have had to, so the 30 days he just finished are absolved, so he didn't have to do it. Now, so if he counted the days of the first vow and set aside his vow, and then asked for the absolution of his vow and had it released by the Beth Din, then the days he observed the first vow can count for the second. How's that? It's interesting. So he took 2 separate vows. I'm a Nazirite, I'm a Nazirite. That's 2 times 30 days. But before he finished the 30 days, he annulled the first one. So those 30 days that he observed can count for the second. Fascinating. And he can bring the sacrifices that he set aside and complete his obligation. So even though he originally said he's going to be 2 times Nazirite, which is 60 days, 2 times 30, because he absolved himself from the vow. Like any vow can be nullified and absolved. You've learned that already, I'm sure. Then, so he's absolving the first one. So, and now that can count for the second. Even the sacrifices he set aside can be used for the second. Moreover, even if he brought the sacrifices for his atonement, and even if he shaved off his hair and then asked for his vow to be absolved, the observance of the first vow fulfills the second. What's the argument, the logic? The logic is that the second vow does not take effect until after the first one is completed. And since the first vow was never completed because he absolved himself before he had finished it completely, so the first vow was released, it's as if it did not exist initially. So whatever he did can count towards the second. Number 11. If he says, Hareini Nazir le'olam, I will be a Nazirite forever, or for all the days of my life, then he will have to be a Nazirite for all the days of his life. If he says he'll be a Nazirite for 1,000 years, then it doesn't have to be for all his life. If he lives for till 1,001, then 1,001st year, he doesn't have to be a Nazirite. But obviously, we know that's not going to happen. 12. What is in this difference between a Nazirite forever and a Nazirite for a limited time? Normally, the laws are the same. You can't drink wine or grape products. You can't cut your hair, and you shouldn't become tameh with the dead. But there are some differences. A Nazirite for a limited time is forbidden to cut his hair until the conclusion of his Nazirite vow. So he says he's a Nazirite for 30 days or 30 years or whatever, he may not cut his hair for that whole duration. However, a Nazirite forever, by contrast, may alleviate the burden of his hair with a razor, meaning he can take a haircut every 12 months. So if a guy is a Nazirite forever, we do not expect him that his hair should drag along the floor. So every 12 months, we allow him to take a haircut. 12 months is going to be quite long hair as it is. But he's allowed, if you're forever, then you can take a haircut every 12 months. But every time you cut your hair, at the end of the year, you have to bring sacrifice of 3 animals, as we find by Avshalom, King David's son, from year to year when he would shave, because his hair was heavy for him and he would shave. Avshalom was a Nazirite forever, and every year he could take a haircut, but he had to bring the offerings. This concept is a halacha transmitted by the oral tradition. When a Nazirite forever becomes impure, he must bring sacrifices to atone for impurity and shave as is required in an instant, just like a Nazirite for a limited time. It's the same. So if you're not supposed to become, what happens if you're with somebody and they drop dead, God forbid, and you're holding them in your hands? So you became against your will, involuntarily, inadvertently, you came into contact with the dead. So you have to bring sacrifices, and you have to shave and start and go back to being a Nazarite. Now, Samson, Shimshon Hagiber, the mighty Samson, who was a great savior of Israel, but who died a tragic death. And you all know the story, that he got involved with this Philistine woman, Delilah, and she was trying to find out the secret of his strength. And as a seductress, she was successful, and he told her, unfortunately, he gave her the secret that it's his hair. That is because he's a Nazirite, and if they cut his hair, he'll lose his strength. So while he was sleeping, she cut his hair, and then she called the Philistines, and they chained him and took him as a prisoner, because indeed he lost his strength. I'm just giving you the story in brief. And then there was a big Philistine national holiday, and a big stadium that had masses of people, and they brought out Samson as a trophy, as a prisoner of war, and they chained him to 2 pillars, 2 big giant pillars holding up the stadium. And he made a prayer to God. He said, "Give me back my strength just this one time. Let me die with the Philistines." And God answered his prayer, and he got his strength back, and he pushed the mighty pillars, and the stadium came crashing down, and many Philistines died. And unfortunately, Samson died in the crush as well. So he was a tragic figure. He was a great hero, but a tragic hero. So he was a Nazirite for life. We read the Haftarah we read in Parshas Nosoi just a few weeks ago, is how an angel of God visits the parents of Samson, and first the mother, then the father as well, telling them they're going to have a son, and he must be a Nazirite, and they must treat him as a holy boy. So, and he grew up to save the Jews from the Philistines who were terrorizing them badly. So Samson, it's interesting, he did not take the vow, right? The angel told his parents he should be a Nazirite from birth. So therefore, the law of Samson is somewhat unique and different from the law regarding other Nazirites. 13, Samson was not a Nazirite in a complete sense, for he never took the vow. Just the angel caused him to be holy. What laws did apply to him? He was forbidden to drink wine or cut his hair. He was, however, permitted to incur impurity due to contact with the dead. And this too was transmitted by the oral tradition. Accordingly, so if someone today or yesterday says, "Behold, I am a Nazirite like Samson," he will be a Nazirite forever, which means he can never cut his hair or drink wine. He may not cut his hair every 12 months like the others, because he didn't say he'll be a Nazirite forever. He said he'll be a Nazirite like Samson, which is different. He is, however, permitted to become impure because of contact with the dead. So he'll never be able to cut his hair or drink wine. If he says, if they say to him, "Are you crazy? You're never able to cut your hair for the rest of your life." He said, "No, I didn't mean Samson from the Bible. I met Samson, my cousin down the road. He was my cousin Samson. He was also a Nazirite. I meant like him." Okay? We can't argue with that. Maybe he meant his cousin Samson. So if he says my intent was to refer to another person whose name was also Samson, then he's not a Nazirite. When a person takes a Nazirite vow like Samson's, he's not permitted to have it absolved because Samson's Nazirite vow was binding forever. So normally, a normal Nazirite vow, you may annul the vow like other vows, but not if you say like Samson. There's different languages that he might say, which means he's a Nazir like Samson. Even if he doesn't say the words like Samson, what if he says like the son of Manoach, who was Samson's father, or the husband of Delilah, or the one who uprooted the gates of Gaza, or the one whose eyes was gouged out by the Philistines, or the one who broke the pillars of the stadium, or something like that, he must keep the Nazirite restrictions observed by Samson, even though those deeds could have been performed by another person. But we know that those are pretty famously associated with Samson. The other most famous biblical Nazirite was the prophet Shmuel, Samuel the prophet, the anointer of King Saul and King David. The prophet Samuel of Ramah was a Nazirite forever. Therefore, one who says, behold, I am like Samuel of Ramah, or like Hannah's son. Hannah was the one we read the Haftarah on Rosh Hashanah. She was childless and she prayed at the sanctuary and she was granted a son. If he says, I'm a Nazirite like Hannah's son, or his father was Elkanah, or like the one who hewed Agag at Gilgal. Agag was the king of Amalek that Saul failed to execute and therefore lost his kingship, and Samuel did it personally. So if he describes Samuel the prophet in other language, he is a Nazirite forever like the prophet Samuel. We do not say that perhaps his intent was to refer to another person who performed such deeds. That's illogical. 17, when a person says, behold, I am a Nazirite, as this building is full of paper, rocks, tomatoes, whatever is in that building, or as this container is full, then we have to now work out what did he mean exactly. So we have to investigate his intent. If he says my intent was not to be a Nazirite for my whole life, my intent was only to prolong the days of my Nazirite vow for a long time, then it's only 30 days. We discussed this at the beginning of the chapter, where he says if he's going to be a Nazirite for a long time, we don't have a definition of what long time means, and therefore it goes by the standard time, which is 30 days. If, however, when they're investigating, what exactly did he mean by I'm a Nazirite as this building is full? If he says, I made this vow without any specific intent, then we look at the building or the container. What is it? We look at it as if it is filled with mustard seeds, which have tiny little specks, right? If you fill a whole container or a whole house with little mustard seeds, there's going to be 1 million of them, which means he's going to be a Nazirite forever. So it's because he was vague and ambiguous. He says, I'm a Nazirite as this building is full. He doesn't say. So if it was full of rocks, then okay, we can count the rocks or tomatoes. But if he's vague, then we take it to the most, and we say it's like mustard seeds, and he'll be a Nazirite for his whole life. He too will be allowed to cut his hair every 12 months, and at that time he'll bring sacrifices like all those who say they'll be a Nazirite forever. 18, Stephen, listen to this one. But Stephen, you're not the only one. You have a few compatriots in the share, I notice. When a person says, behold, I am a Nazirite like the hairs of my head. Now, some people can actually count the hairs on their head. Not everyone is privileged to be able to do that, you see. Or if he says, like the dust of the earth or the sand of the sea, it's as if he said, I'll keep as many Nazarite vows as I have hairs on my head, or as there is dust on the earth or sand on the seashore. Therefore, he must shave his hair every 30 days and begin observing a second Nazarite vow for another 30 days, cut his hair, and continue this pattern for the rest of his life. The question is, what if he actually has 3 hairs on his head and you can't count them? Then I would imagine he only has to be a Nazarite for 90 days. But the dust of the earth and the sand of the sea is certainly not comparable. So if a person has a full head of hair, I don't know, does anybody know how many hairs are there in a normal full head of hair? Yeah? You can Google it and find out. Anyway, let's have a look. Okay. So he's a Nazarite forever, and whenever he shaves his hair, he's forbidden to drink wine and become impure. Or because if he drinks wine and becomes impure, even on the day he shaves his head, he is worthy of lashes. So that's serious. To conclude, number 19, behold, he says, I'm a Nazarite if I eat this loaf of bread. Or behold, I'm a Nazarite if I eat it. Behold, I'm a Nazarite if I eat it. So it depends how many things he said. If he eats it, he's obligated to observe as many Nazarite vows as he took. So if he said it 3 times, it's going to be 3 times 30. So be a Nazarite for 30 days, shave and bring the sacrifices, then do another 30 days, shave and bring sacrifice, then do another 30 days, depending on how many times he said it. Okay. Any questions?
So why would hair be considered to be holy? I mean, why would that, what is that all about?
Because he's taking vows upon himself that
Yeah, but why is that part of the Nazarite?
that most people do not have to observe.
Mm.
So if he's giving himself more responsibilities than the average person. So the average person can drink wine, can cut his hair when he likes, can be a pallbearer at a funeral. But if he takes a vow that he's not going to do those things, so he's making himself holier, so to speak.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I've just Googled. It says the amount of hair on a person's head can vary by individual. The average human head has about 100,000 hairs with a similar number of hair follicles.
100,000. Wow. Okay. So that's why if he says like the hair on his head, he's going to be a nazir for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Present company excluded.
Yes.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Okay, guys, have a great week. And
Thank you.
so you know that your compatriots who are doing 3 chapters a day or just the Sefer HaMitzvahs have just had a siyum yesterday. They do a 1-year program. Ours is a 3-year program. So please God, in 2 years' time, I look forward to having a big party with you.
Yeah. Now,
Rabbi,
Rabbi, if we join the 3-year program, then we don't have to take notice of the 1 year, the daily one. Is that right? I mean, it's daily.
No, it's really they're both standalone. You can do both. The one we do at the shul is a 2-minute thing.
Yes.
And it's the mitzvah of the day, which actually aligns with the 3 chapters a day. So you'll be learning other things in that. So it complements it. It doesn't replace, it does not replace it. It's different topics.
Okay.
So if you were doing the 3 chapters a day, then you would not have to do the mitzvah of the day because you would be covering it. But
Yeah.
being I do 1 chapter we're doing, that's a different schedule than the mitzvah a day. So it will complement it and you will not, it's not redundant. You can do both.
Yes, that webinar last night was very good.
Yeah.
For the Rebbe's 7th Yortzeit.
Yeah.
We were there in 1982 at our nephew's wedding, January 1982, and I got the dollar from the Rebbe. I don't know what happened to it. I might have given it to charity as one's supposed to do. I don't know.
Most people keep that one as a memento and they give another dollar to charity.
Yes, I don't know if I did keep it. I think it got mixed up with ordinary currency.
Okay. Somebody else is not muted, and I can't hear 2 people at the same time, so I'm going to say goodbye.
Yes, thank you.